So workers at the Pelindaba nuclear complex near Pretoria who suffered chronic illnesses while working there between 1990 and the early 2000s will find out today if they have renewed hope of seeking compensation from the Nuclear Energy Corporation. The Pretoria High Court will be deciding whether to set aside Public Protector Busiwe Mkhwebane's report into the matter, which said no findings could be made as to whether workers suffered ill health from working at Pelindaba. This is despite her predecessor, Thuli Madonsela, finding otherwise in an investigation she was unable to complete. Mkhwebane is not opposing the Workers' Court application to set aside her report. So let's bring in Mike Kantey from the Coalition Against Nuclear Energy to shed more light on this. Very good morning to you, Mike. All right, we've had a rather detailed intro there to try and set this up, but tell us what's going to happen in court today.
Well, it's very simple. I think that lacking opposition from the public protector, one would assume that the report will be rejected out of hand and in fact sent back. But I think there are much larger issues at stake here, because if you look at it from in the context of what's just been spoken about in terms of corruption and so forth, that if we go back in time to the Mbeki era and the arms deal, the pebble bed modular reactor, this is part of that negative legacy, in the sense that these workers appeared at a hearing of the Portfolio Committee in Parliament, chaired by Langazita in the 2000s. And it was quite a moving scene. One of the workers gave personal evidence and was in tears in Parliament. In fact, nearly all of us were in tears. It was a very tragic scene in Parliament. And Langazita made a solemn vow that this would be thoroughly investigated and compensation would be awarded to the affected workers. And this has been going on for 2 decades now. Quite a few of the workers have died not very nice deaths from exposure to radiation. And I think that what it sheds, the light that it sheds, is also on the nuclear industry, how it manages somehow to obfuscate and deny the ill effects of the nuclear energy, particularly of the radiation that comes out of these installations, not just the nuclear power stations, but also enrichment plants and nuclear fuel assembly plants. It's a very dirty industry, and people keep trying to tell us that it isn't.
I mean, there certainly is a push for this, isn't there, regardless of these findings. Why do you think this case hasn't been taken seriously? And I ask that if this has been going on for 2 decades. So what is the problem here?
I personally believe, and I may be mistaken, but my perception is that the stakes are so high in terms of the quantity of money. I mean, we're talking 16 billion in the case of the pebble bed, which was produced a couple of CAD drawings, to show for it. And that the powers that be, the nexus, if you want to call it, is so intent on exploiting the economic value of military weapons, nuclear weapons, and nuclear power, which without civilian nuclear power, there cannot be nuclear weapons, because it's a byproduct of the nuclear civilian industry. Particularly the uranium, the enriched uranium and plutonium, they all come out of the industry, and uranium mining. It's a package deal, and you can imagine the quantity of money worldwide that's involved. And the system is manipulated systematically, in my experience over 40 years, to confuse people and delay justice insofar as the public protector does not protect the ordinary folk, the working class, and the marginalized communities. The public protector protects those in power from exposure to wrongdoing. And that's the problem with corruption, that we as citizens are obliged, without much further ado, to oppose all sorts of actions on the environmental justice front alone. You think of Paulo Beni and Bazooka that was assassinated. It's a mess. And I think that South African citizens, those of us who have chosen to stay here and see it through, we that remain here in South Africa, have a moral duty to oppose all of this corruption. My particular brief is the nuclear industry, and this particular case highlights the problems with our Chapter 26 institutions of the Constitution, and how the Constitution itself has been undermined by corrupt officials. And I think that, for me, we've got to strengthen our efforts, as the previous speaker said, to raise the entire level of integrity and of justice in this country. And here's a case that ought to be followed by those who care, to the point where the workers are, at least their families of the deceased alone, are adequately compensated in the same way the asbestos people were. It's
Absolutely.
the same thing.
Mike, wishing you the best of luck. Thanks for talking to us.